Hello, I'm Regina Botras, and this is Backstage, where we talk with the who's who on stage, in dance, comedy and performing arts, speaking with the leading theatre makers of our times and how they came to the stage and what drives them and inspires them. I'm joined by Nick Schlieper. He is the co-adapter of Grief is a Thing with Feathers. He's also the lighting designer. He's co-adapted with Simon Phillips and Toby Schmitz. It's directed by Simon Phillips from the Max Porter novella, an award-winning novella. Nick, he has designed for all of the major performing arts companies in Australia and works regularly in Europe and the USA. He's one of Australia's most highly awarded designers, receiving 6 Melbourne Green Room Awards, 7 Sydney Theatre Awards, the inaugural 2013 Australian Production Designer Guild Best Lighting Design Award, as well as 5 Hellman Awards. Look, he's done so much. We won't get into all of those productions. We'll have a chat about this one, but we don't often get a designer on to talk about the theatre, and it's such an integral part of a stage production. But first of all, welcome, Nick, to Stages.
Thank you very much.
Look, this adaptation, I suppose, I went out looking for a copy of the novella last week to get into it before our interview, and it's not in any of the local bookshops that I could find. It's back order. So I understand it's a memoir-style reflection of Max's personal experience with grief. Can you give us a better understanding of this adaptation?
Just to set the record straight on the novella, it's more than a memoir. It's a kind of fascinating study of what we all go through in the state of grieving. Yes, it's heavily informed by, in Max's case, losing his father at a young age, which resonates with me because so did I. But it's in the novella, and therefore in our adaptation, it's actually the mother who dies. So yes, there's bits of Max's life in there, but it's certainly not a memoir. It's simply an author drawing on their own experience of life to help inform a work. It's also much more all-encompassing view of that process than something that is limited by someone's own personal experiences. It's much more wide-ranging and a sort of 360-degree view of it. And it also ventures into the territory of things that one uses to get oneself through that process. In the case of the central figure in Grief is the Thing with Feathers, because of what he does for a living and what he's currently engaged in when his wife dies, he chooses to invent a kind of an alter ego that is a crow. I won't attempt to explain why. Best you come and see the show. But it also branches out into the very nature of love and how we draw on relationships that are centered around love to get ourselves through things. It alludes to the possibilities of art of various kinds to get one through times like this. It's a much more all-encompassing look at it.
And it is something that is, I guess, very hard and personal and yet universal at the same time. The invention of the crow is that is the father, not the child's point of view. Whose point of view, I guess, is it coming from?
It's definitely the father. He's an academic working on a book about Ted Hughes's crow poems. And he's, as one is, when you're working on something, that's his current obsession. So that's the only reason why it happens to be a crow. But you could pick your own alter ego. The boys, on the other hand, who we never told their ages, but we've always worked on the basis that they're probably 8 and 10 or thereabouts. They have to come to grips with their father suddenly having conversations with a crow either in the bathroom with the door shut or sometimes in the living room with the door equally shut. And a lot of the boys' commentary on it is retrospective, so once they're grown up and adult. And they look back on this weird period in their lives. And, you know, as one of them says towards the end of the evening, we lost our mother, we love our father, we talk to crows. It's not that weird. That's with the perspective of, you know, that's from an adult perspective at that point.
You mentioned that he's studying Ted Hughes, and there's an Emily Dickinson poem, which I understand is sort of the hope is a thing with feathers.
Exactly.
So I'm imagining quite a poetic language in the work.
It is. It's. I was given this book to read about 2 years after it came out. It was published in 2015. I'm not surprised you're having trouble getting hold of a copy now. I hope that is reflective of the local interest in this production. It's a first novel, so it's an extraordinary phenomenon. It's been translated into 30-something languages. I think it's up to 35 at the moment. I think we are the 7th stage adaptation, and of course it's been filmed with Benedict Cumberbatch, which is coming out soon, I believe. So it is quite a phenomenal thing. When I was given it to read, I took to bed one night, and you read it in just under 2 hours.
Yeah.
And there's a number of things that strike you about it. One is the poetic form of much of the language. Mm-hmm. It's certainly not written in verse, neither blank nor the other kind. Mm-hmm. It's lyrical, but the way the pages even present visually, it's incredibly organized. He uses different fonts very strategically throughout the book, which is always a pointer or a signifier of something. You just need to figure out what that something is, of course, or make your own decision about it. So no, it's not strictly speaking poetry, but it kind of is. Mm-hmm. And then there are effectively 4 voices. The boys are an interchangeable voice, so they would count as one. And then there's 3 voices, I'm sorry. And then there's the father, and then there's the crow. So they each have their own linguistic forms. Oh. The crow's sections are probably the most akin to capital P poetry. Mm-hmm. But it's all written in a very lyrical fashion, yes.
Mm. And crows have such a, I don't know, they're creatures that have used in numerous poems. I mean, the raven, Ted Hughes himself has the crow, and, you know, very intelligent, but also birds of ill omen. Does it have that kind of, you know, potency to it?
Crow spends a lot of time talking about his bad rep. He's very aware of the word out on the street, and spends a lot of time defending his own reputation. He's brilliantly scatological and foul-mouthed on occasions, but always inventively. But he also talks a great deal about an underrated quality of the corvid breed, which is their sentimentality. So this one, at the very least, is very proud of his sentimentality, much as Max Porter does himself. He wears it as a badge of honor on his sleeve rather than ever feeling the need to apologize for it. He still digresses into rambling inventively about the disgusting things that crows like to eat and do, but always counters it by saying, you know, on the other hand, this is 2 grieving babies in a nest, is how he puts it, are pure crows. So he's very keen to keep reminding us that there's more to crows than just the bird of ill omen and the bird that effectively feeds on carrion and human garbage with equal delight.
Sounds like it's also then something about nature. I mean, internal nature of us as creatures, potentially. I wonder, I mean, let's get into the lighting side of it. When you look at something like this, and maybe I can ask about the lighting in terms of the voices. Is that something, like, what? I guess what is the first thing you looked for in this, and how does lighting, influence or impact, or what choices have you made, I suppose?
Well, the background to that is that I've been working on this for about 5 years. It's been a long birth, this show. So Simon Phillips, with whom I have worked for, 3.5 decades. Certainly more shows with Simon than with any other director. We have co-designed the set. We've also co-adapted the book along with Toby Schmitz. I'm only mentioning all of that by way of saying that by the time, and this tends to be my process anyway, whether I'm designing the set or not, but by the time you get a design to the point where it's presented formally to a company that's going to put it on, I kind of know how 3/4 of it is going to look. I try very hard to leave at least a quarter up for grabs to see what magic comes out of, or what accidents, fortuitous accidents, come out of rehearsal rooms often. But with over that long a gestation process, by the time we actually started rehearsals, I knew what Crow looked like as opposed to Dad. It's a fairly ephemeral thing, and it's always very difficult to talk about in words, but there's a darkness and a heightened theatricality about a lot of what Crow looks like, and difficult to make yourself do, but a comparative normality or even banality about the way Dad's sections look. And the boys drift somewhere in between. There's another strand that runs through the show that is, the easiest label for it is fables or legends, usually told by Crow, often acted out by Crow along with the boys. So they have their own quality again. So there's 3 or 4 quite distinct looking and feeling worlds, and they are equally differentiated musically as well by Freya Shagarnet, who sits there playing the cello live brilliantly every night. So it's all the forces working together to instinctually guide an audience into where you are now. Because Toby will change frequently throughout the evening from Dad to Crow, sort of on a dime, really. And it's all very well when you're reading it to know that you turn the page and there's a very large heading on the following page that says Crow as opposed to Dad. But of course, when you're just seeing it, these are all the normal things that one has to be very, very clear about so you don't leave an audience behind when you adapt the book. Without the benefit of being able to see that, what you do see needs to be sending you very, very clear signals. So that's the inherent dramaturgy of, I guess, any lighting design, really. But the stakes are slightly higher when you have one person without time to change a costume or anything. He might do nothing more than flick his collar up, do a turn on the spot, chuck a handful of feathers in the air or whatever. That we use every possible variation to make sure the audience know who they're looking at. And of course, Toby changes voices. Very important. His Crow definitely has his origins somewhere east of Bow in London, whereas Dad is much more sort of normal, neutral, RP, maybe slightly North London coloured. But yeah, it's all of the factors, lighting included, all of the elements, I should say, are employed to try and help make sure the audience know where they are and who they're looking at any given point in time.
Mm-hmm. And talking about the adaptation, was it a struggle? I mean, when you have a work of or written work, everything happens in the imagination of the reader.
Yeah.
And then having to really kind of, I guess, solidify that for the stage or in text, I suppose. And is the crow a voice in the book in terms of, does it have dialogue, or is that a choice that's made? Or what choices did you make in the adaptation?
The only people in the book who have any kind of dialogue, have any genuine dialogue, are the two boys.
Yeah, right.
Again, in the book, their sections are simply headed boys. So it could be one of them talking. It could be both of them sharing it. We frequently share the sections between the two boys, so that becomes the closest thing in the evening to a genuine, normal dialogue. Dad and the boys interact sparingly, but they do. Crow's sections, by contrast, are nearly all soliloquies. Okay. He does have the odd conversation with Dad, but, you know, that's somebody talking to a voice in their own head. So it's that version of dialogue rather than the traditional one. Crow's sections are just these brilliant linguistic explosions of... It's everything from scatological rants to deeply profound little morsels that are sort of breadcrumbs through his speeches. It's sensational, right? And really, the things Simon and I kept saying while we were reading it and talking about how to put it on a stage was, you know, we must not stuff up this brilliant piece of writing in the process. It's I think the whole process of adaptation, I've always been very wary of it, because if something is wonderful in its own form, just leave it there. Don't dick with it. It ain't broken. You don't need to fix it. However, if you can honestly, hand on heart, say, I think by translating this into a different form, we can illuminate it in some other way. I mean, the process of watching three people grieve, it is enormously moving when you read it. It doesn't need help. But every human being's instinct, I would like to think, is that when you're watching another person a few meters away from you in the same room, breathing the same air as you are at this very moment in time, going through this horrendous emotional process, it's going to move you in a different way to reading that on the page. It's not necessarily a better way, but it's a very different experience. That's just one of the many things that potentially make the gamble of translating this to the form of theatre a worthwhile one. And we were very lucky that Max was able to come out for the week of previews and through to opening night. And whilst he is as gorgeous a human being as you would expect the author of this particular work, and indeed his other books, to be, I don't think he was being polite in his response to seeing the show for the first time. So he also found it moving in a different way to reading it. And we talked about this quite a bit while he was here, because, you know, it is a dangerous process, and there's an enormous moral responsibility to not stuff it up and to take the work incredibly seriously. And as I say, not improve it, but hopefully just sort of turn the prism a little bit and allow people to see it in a slightly different way through a new lens.
And it must be so, I mean, because reading is obviously such a personal, private, solo act, whereas the a room full of people experiencing and witnessing this must be extraordinary in the space. And I wonder for you personally, I mean, you mentioned you had a similar, loss of a parent at a young age. How was the process for you personally? I mean, challenging?
No, because I was 11 when my father died. It's a very long time ago. But I can vividly remember the moment my mother told me, for instance. That definitely there is a direct echo moment in the book and play of that moment. And given that my childhood must have otherwise been blissfully happy because I remember so little of it in any great detail, but that moment in my life, never forgotten. And it's when you see the equivalent moment, and it is so deftly, beautifully, lightly dealt with. It's such a tiny little passing mention. It's very early in the evening. And you think, for somebody to be able to crystallize that massively all-encompassing at the time process and just distill it into effectively 1.5 lines, the lightest, deftest little touch. And certainly in my case, it just goes, it takes me straight back to that morning. It's the work is full of things like that. And the first time I read it, as I said, I took it to bed, read it in 2 hours, sort of looked at it slightly stunned and found myself going back to the beginning and then reading it again. It's both groundbreaking in its form, and yet at the same time, it's imbued with, capital L literary credentials and qualities, more to the point. It's a really unusual thing, and I think Max may have slightly invented a new form of the novel here. 2 of his subsequent novels kind of venture, one of them in particular, Lanny, stylistically ventures into the same territory, where it tells a pretty straightforward story in a very unusual way. It's just a fascinating view of the world and way of rendering that view.
Mm-hmm. Sounds exquisite. I can't wait to see it and to read it. And coming up next, I think you're working on Orlando, another work of classic coming to Belvoir, a Virginia Woolf adaptation.
Yes, that's right. We're 3 weeks into rehearsals.
Yay.
Yes, I'm doing 2 shows here in a row, so it was very unusual.
Well, I'm sure we are all overjoyed that you are. Nick Schlieper, thank you so much for joining me and talking to me about this wonderful sounding production. Absolute pleasure, and I hope you enjoy it when you come to see it. Well, that was Nick Schlieper, co-adapter and lighting designer for Grief is a Thing with Feathers on till the 24th of August at Belvoir Theatre. And now, yes, Cats the Musical.